Matt Mitchell, and we are back. My guests are with me, Tracy Gardner. She is a licensed professional counselor and a registered play therapist. I have Mr. Brad Marler, who has been a teacher, a coach, and he is a youth minister. I have also Elizabeth White, who has taught for many years and now is a principal. So, we have been talking about issues that middle school kids are dealing with. There's bullying, there's sexting, pornography, lots of different things that our kids are facing. We've talked about in some of the other videos that we want to prepare our kids for these battles that they're going to face. One thing that we're going to have to be able to do is to communicate. And so with that, communicating and connecting with our kids, that is paramount. Communication is vital. What do you see as maybe one of the major distractions between parents and kids?
I think the big thing right now, we've talked about it a little before, is so much stuff taking the time away from our time with our students or our children. And the biggest right now, I would say, is probably the cell phone.
Okay.
You go on vacation, you go wherever you go, they're constantly in a phone. You said, even if you're trying to watch a movie together, and if you look around, oftentimes you're going to see students and sadly parents, they're not caring anything about the time together, the movie that's on, but they're constantly looking at a phone. And some of it may be good. Maybe they got to work or whatever, and they're trying to do both. I'm not trying to discredit all of it, but the majority of the time is that separation. They're focused on the phone. They're focused on what's going on in that phone, rather than just some good quality time that they can have with their family.
You're nodding.
Absolutely. I see it in my own home all the time. And like you said, sadly with the parents, I'm very guilty of this. My boys tease me constantly about how often my text messages come through. And it's always something with work, and it's always something that's important. This summer I had the opportunity to do some training, and one of my homework pieces for the training was to ask someone in my home, what do I do that impacts our relationship in a negative way? And I asked my oldest son, and it hurt when he told me, Mom, you're always working. Even when you're not there, you're still on your phone taking care of things. My job's very important, and I absolutely love it. But that was a real gut check for me as a mom, to realize how often I have that phone in my hand, how often I'm taking care, and I'm giving most of my attention here. Even if I'm listening, it's important to my son, who's a teenager, that I'm listening with everything I have, that I'm present with him. And to do that, I've got to put that phone down.
Communication, but also connection. And so everybody's sitting in the same room a lot of times, maybe even at the same table, but everybody's looking at their own screen, so still disconnected, even though in the same room in each other's presence, not connected. So one thing that you said was, I think, very important, is that to put that screen down. Now, we're not anti-technology. We all have a phone. I think we all have. We are all in favor of technology, but we also recognize that it does create some disconnect.
Absolutely. A lot of times the phones and having the technology in our hands, we're still hearing people, but there's a difference between hearing and truly listening,
right.
Being engaged, giving that eye contact, being present in that moment, seeing even what's going on around us. Those are things, you hear these crazy stories about people walking off cliffs and stuff, looking at their cell phone, and you kind of laugh. That's not me. I've run into a door frame before. So, that it's a real problem. And the thing is, a lot of times as a mom, I want to put this all on my kids. You guys need to stop looking at that screen. But the reality is, for us to communicate effectively, to hear and to listen, we all have to step away from it.
How many times have we in our own homes, and let's just be honest, have our spouse or our kids say, I told you that yesterday. And you're like, no, you didn't tell me that yesterday. And they're like, yes, I tried to tell you yesterday I had whatever that is. And again, I'm guilty. I've got something going on. Something was happening that I never really listened. Even though I might have been making complete eye contact with them, even though that they thought I was listening, it didn't register. And
Absolutely.
so how well did I really communicate with my wife or with my children if I don't even remember what they were actually telling me that night?
Right.
And it's not always that screen. I can do the same thing stirring the spaghetti sauce. You know,
Yeah.
it's wherever your mind is.
Yeah.
And it's important for our kids that we give them our minds, just little bits along the way. And that makes a huge difference.
Right. I mean, how many, and so even you were talking about work related, using the phone. So I would get sucked into Facebook, mindless scrolling. And I made the decision to get off of Facebook. I'm not going to say it was noble because this is the way it happened. Are you on Facebook again? I'll get off of Facebook. And I did. But I mean, so I was angry because I was being called out on it. And so, but I did, and I've been off for months now, and I don't miss it. So I think that it is very easy to get sucked into social media and those kind of things. And when we are, I mean, there's energy where, there's mental energy that goes in that direction that could go in another direction. And that could be toward our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And as a therapist or just anyone who is observant, eye contact, as y'all were both talking about, is so important. It's good for brain development. And children need that from their parents to connect. It helps them to connect. How often have I been in a store and a child is learning language and they're saying, Mommy or Daddy, what's that? And the parent is on their phone completely ignoring them. And they're missing times that they could be developing language in that child.
Right.
And connecting with them, communication. And what they're learning is, I'm trying to talk to my parent. I need to know something, but they're not helping me. So what happens is an unhealthy attachment to where they don't reach out to the parent as much. So the more attention you can give them early on, the better, and they'll learn you're a safe place. This is a good, healthy attachment. This is what the child needs. And then to sit in a restaurant, and we've all seen it, maybe we're all guilty of it, that we're on our phones. Everyone at the table's on their phone, and they're not clued in to what the other's doing, seeing. So it's important that we have that good eye contact.
And even when you can't have eye contact, you were talking about the brain development and the language development. As an educator, I can tell you some of the best reading lessons I ever had with my boys was driving down the road. Now, obviously, if I'm driving, I shouldn't have a screen in front of me, but there are a lot of other places my mind could be. But that's a beautiful time to engage your children in conversation. You have to be looking at something, and sometimes if it's an uncomfortable type of topic, something maybe you are not necessarily looking forward to discussing, you can keep your attention elsewhere, but you can listen and you can respond. And sometimes with communication, we think we always have to talk, we always have to ask the questions, and we always have to know the answers. And that's simply not true. What's most important is that we listen and admit we're all human too. Sometimes we don't know their answers. Sometimes we can help them find it. Sometimes we don't know the answers. At any rate, they need to know that we're going to listen whenever they talk to us.
Right. Now, this is something interesting that I've learned recently. When we listen, we can either listen for understanding or we can listen for problem solving, and different parts of the brain are activated depending on which type of listening we're doing. So let's just take an example where, maybe our child comes to us with some kind of problem. If we are listening in order to solve that problem, there's different part of the brain that's active than if we are listening to understand where our child is coming from. With anybody, this is with anybody. And so this was something that was very interesting, is that if I listen to you with the intent of understanding you, you feel more connected to me, you trust me more, and you're probably going to listen to more of what I have to say when I have something to say. So to listen with the intent of understanding rather than problem solving is going to help us to connect with our kids and develop trust with them. So, we talked about how vital connection is, and there it is tying directly to communication and our willingness to listen in order to understand and even see what kind of emotions they're feeling rather than immediately jump into problem solving.
Absolutely. a lot of times we want to click things off our list, and we don't mean to do that as parents, but in doing so, when our children bring issues to us, what we do is almost, oh, well, this is easy. This is easy. You should just move past this. You should just do this. And we go on. We never hear from them how it makes them feel, how it's impacting other areas of their life, because we're so quick to solve those problems. So yes, listening to understand is crucial. And I know that my husband is probably going to watch this and hope that I do the same thing with him sometimes.
Exactly.
The issues that we want to help our kids with are no different from the issues that we as adults need to deal with our own communication with each other.
Exactly. Great point. Some discussions can be a little awkward. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
The conversation. That's what some people have, the talk. And they're talking to their kids about some of the issues we've been talking about, sexting, pornography, even sex itself. That may be something that is an uncomfortable discussion. So here's how my wife and I, when one of the boys was in 5th grade, he came home and said that a girl asked him if he would have sex with her. We don't even know if the girl knew what that meant. But we went ahead and just took that opportunity. So we started the discussion about sex, and we started having those discussions. I think that it is important to remember, sometimes we think of that singular, the talk, but we need to think about that plural, conversations, plural about that. Again, I know we've used a lot of sports analogies, but football. No coach says to a senior, in a given scenario, oh, well, I told you what to do when you were in the 9th grade, and I never mentioned it again, and I expect you to know how to handle these situations. It doesn't happen like that. So there's that a lot of effort that it's more than one conversation. No coach has one conversation in the 9th grade and expects that conversation to carry over through the senior year. So again, with that preparation from the parent standpoint, for us to be willing to have those awkward discussions, and this is something that is encouraging. So we began having those discussions, and we always got to purchase some of the books that would make that easier and help us have these discussions, and began to explain sex to the boys. So even recently, one of them said, "Well, let's get that book out and read some more from that," and we did. And the next day, I said to my wife Rachel, I said, "That didn't seem awkward, did it?" She said, "It didn't. It really didn't. It was a conversation that flowed, and it was not like that the first time, but it was a topic we've introduced, and we were willing to go there, and now it is a topic. It was much less awkward, much less uncomfortable, and it was just a genuine conversation that flowed between us as parents and them as the kids. So that was encouraging.
I think it begins, and you've kind of discussed this, and y'all kind of hit on it, is when we have these conversations and we're listening. I hear all the time, let me say it this way, I hear all the time, I just don't know what age to start. If you listen, you'll know. If you're talking about this and it becomes kind of the norm, and we're talking, then you can gauge what your student knows, what your child knows, where he's at on the spectrum of knowledge. If you talk with other parents and you communicate with other parents and their friends, and that buddy has already talked to his mom about sex, well, you can just about guarantee that your son already knows about sex because they've talked about it. You know, the phrase of the sum of the 5 closest friends that you have it's a realistic statement that's exactly what's happening. So if you're communicating with others, but if you're listening and you're hearing what your child has to say, and he brings up that, I just saw something really weird on social media, or I saw something, or my buddy said this at school. What do you think about that? It just opens up, hey, I know. Okay, now I know what to say, and maybe you don't need to cover everything in one talk. Like, so many people, I've got to sit down when they're ready, but I can cover this now. Right. And knowing that in the days to come, there's probably going to be more things that are brought up, and there's going to be, things that kind of happen. And so as you're listening, then you have that's maybe easier conversation. And then I would say that this really should be the norm in the family. It should be so easily talked about for multiple reasons. One, so that you can counsel and you can encourage and you can give them what they need. but also so that the line of communication is always open there. So that when they're struggling with something, they know they can come back to you and not automatically, this is some weird thing to talk about, because they're going to talk to somebody. So if you've made it comfortable and you've made it easy for them to come and sit down and say, hey, Dad, let's talk about sex. I'm really struggling with this area of my life, then he's coming to you. If you make it to where it's not easy to come and communicate to you, then he's going to go to his buddy and he's going to say, hey, my girlfriend just pressured me into having sex. What do you think? Okay, well, you know what the buddy's going to say. I mean, we've all had some friends like that, okay? So as a dad, you get a chance to come alongside. Now, I have girls, okay? So I'm a father of 3 girls, and so it's somewhat different in my home, because I need my wife to come alongside of me in some areas that I don't quite understand, because I do view it differently, and my experience was different than what, my wife had. And I think that's a big key to it as well, is understanding that boys maybe communicate a little different than girls, and have some of that conversation. And maybe in some situations we may have viewers that maybe their home is not the traditional husband-wife, and maybe there's some things different. I would strongly recommend gaining some help from somebody else that may help understand the boy, if you're a single mom or a single dad with a daughter, so that they can come alongside, because we are different. We're made different. We think different. And it may be easier, maybe help that you bring along somebody in that communication. And I've been able to do that as a coach as well as a youth pastor for helping families.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
Well, my thought is that I always encourage parents, and I tried to do this myself when my children were growing up, and to be authentic. So when you're having a conversation where this is difficult, and they know that it's difficult, go ahead and say, this is a hard conversation to have. I'm not really sure how to start this. I might flub it up. It might not sound right, and you might want to laugh, and that's okay. But this is important enough for me to talk to you about, and if I seem like I'm not really sure where I'm going with it, I might not be, but it's a conversation we're going to have from time to time. And if you have questions, please ask. So it's more of being your authentic self, and so that they're more likely to talk to you, as opposed to, goodness, that was really uncomfortable from my mom, and I don't think I ever want to talk to her again about this. And so just be yourself in that.
Absolutely, and I think children will respect that 100%, and that helps to build the connection, like we were talking about earlier, which helps with the communication overall. And you were right; they will be communicating with somebody. What I see in the school a lot of times is you have children talking about things, and they're using these phrases, and they don't have a clue what they're talking about. They know the phrases, and they know somewhat of a context in which to use them. As a parent, I think it's important that we listen enough to hear some of these things, or to see what they're laughing about when they make that joke on TV, and we see what they're laughing at, and we hit the still pause right then and go, okay, everybody laughed. What does that mean? And don't let them off the hook with just saying, oh, I don't know, somebody else said it. No, let's talk about it. Stop right in that moment. Right. Have that conversation. And a lot of things mean different things than they used to mean. I'm finding that with a lot of the terms, a lot of the slang that the kids are using these days. But it's important to me as mom that I stay up on that. Not that I have any great desire to, but so that I can know what my kids are dealing with when I hear them using those terms. And when I hear them saying things that I don't know what it is, ask. And let them describe it to me. And it's really funny, sometimes they're not even sure what it means.
Right.
It's interesting sometimes.
When you said that, it made me think, why are they so more apt to go talk to a buddy? Well, they're comfortable with them. This is normal conversation with them. It's easy to talk to them. They don't feel like that it's automatically we're going to go to a judgment phase, that I am going to still be accepted, and I still am going to be loved by this friend group that I have. And I think we can learn some of that from parenting. You know, that when we are having these conversations, well, we should be in the same way through that. And so I just thought, as you were talking, of how much easier it is to talk to friends about that, and then ask myself the question, why would it be so easy to talk to them?
Right. And we've talked about before the parents having a big reaction, and we have to kind of, as the adult in the situation, when we're truly listening and a child says something that completely shocks us, we have to control our reactions to that, because one reaction on our part, just one knee-jerk reaction, sincerely could keep us, it could build that wall, don't you?
Shut down that whole communication process.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a test.
Yeah.
Here's a little bit of information. Let me see how my parent's going to handle this. And you have to be that safe place for your child. If they know that you're going to listen and not judge, and you might feel upset, but if they see that, and you might have that solution-focused mentality like you were talking about, I'm going to fix this. This is not going to happen anymore. Or yes, I need to explain this to my child in this way. But if your wheels are spinning as they're talking, they're not going to feel as comfortable. But if you're just fully present with them and you're that safe place, they'll continue to come to you, and they want to.
Yeah, even being authentic and telling them, I'm not going to lie to you. You've blown my mind a little bit right now.
Yeah.
But I want us to talk about this. This is important. I still want to hear you. I still want to hear what you're saying. And I don't know how I feel right now. As a mom, I feel that often. I don't know how I feel right now. Or I'm feeling a big feel right now. And I'm going to need just a second, but I'm not mad at you. We just got to figure out how we're going to work through this together. And stepping back and coming at it from that angle.
I think a good gauge is, what is their first reaction when they tell you something? Is their reaction to you fear? Because if it is, then maybe you're not parenting well. If every time they come to you, they're fearful of what's going to happen, then maybe we need to change the way we parent. Because that's not yes, there has to be discipline. And we all know that sitting around this table, and I'm sure those that are watching, there has to be some discipline. But if every time my child comes to me and she has something she needs to tell me, and she's constantly living in fear of what daddy's going to do, then maybe I'm missing it. Because I want my daughters to come to me and know that I'm going to love them through it all. My daughters are not perfect, and we're just like everybody else. But I want her to be able to come to me and say, hey, Dad, this is what's going on in my life. Hey, Dad, this is a struggle that I'm having. And her first reaction is not fear, but know that Dad's there. Dad loves her. Dad cares about her. I think about Christ. What if every time that we went to Him with something, that we had to constantly live in fear? I love Scripture where it says, now there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. That I no longer have to come. I don't come to God in fear, but I come to knowing that He loves me, knowing that He cares for me, so much that He died for me. And so in the same way, I think parenting well is that. Knowing that their first knee-jerk reaction is not that Daddy's fixing to yank out his belt or I'm grounded from my phone, but Daddy loves me. And whatever Dad does for me, because we have that relationship, I know it's going to be for my best.
Mm-hmm. And also with that, I thought back to my childhood. I had a picture of that when I had a question from my father one time. He cut the news off, which was a big deal. That never happened. And I thought, okay, he feels that I'm important. So that, no matter what he said after that, it really didn't matter, because I thought he recognized that I had a problem. And so I encourage parents to do that too. Put the phone down. Put it away. Don't let them see it, because it is a friend in the room, or it's another person in the room. So if you're just in the room with your child, TV off, and it's that special time, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, how will that make them feel to know that those things aren't important? I'm just here with you. And tell me more about that, and let them know you're present with them. They'll come back every time.
That's good. Very good. As we have the conversation or conversations about sex, I think it's important that we set some expectations as parents. When we go into the schools with character education through Oasis, we promote abstinence until marriage. There's lots of very practical reasons for that. There's the spread of sexually transmitted diseases and infections. You don't have to deal with that when you're abstinent. There's the possibility of an unplanned pregnancy. And then even something that you mentioned earlier is that premarital sex can have a negative impact on the marriage and future relationships. So there's very practical reasons to promote abstinence. Sometimes parents want to kind of give an out as like, well, listen, this is hard, and I know you're going to give into this, talking about premarital sex. That really sets the expectation very low. And I think as parents that it's our responsibility to set that expectation higher than to say, I know that you're going to fall in this way. Even I know we're really locked in on coaching analogies, but coaches set expectations high. And even as parents, when it comes to sports, parents tend to set the expectation high as what they expect from their children in sports and athletics. Parents tend to set the expectation high for what they expect from their children with academics. I expect you to try hard. I expect you to make good grades, or I expect you to do your best on that field or court. And oftentimes, parents may falter and not set the expectation high when it comes to sex and that expectation of abstinence. So I think that when we look at it from that perspective, if we can set the expectation high in other areas, and we can do so without making our child feel like that we will kill them if they don't make straight A's, or that we're going to be so disappointed in them if they don't get a home run, that we can also use that mindset to say we're still going to set the expectation high with the kind of the underlying knowledge that we love you unconditionally. I think that is a mindset that we need to develop as parents in this issue of sex.
100%. And I would add one thing to that is all those things are great, but the emotional toll that it takes on students when they become sexually active is it's tragic. The hurt that comes, we talked about value today, about how now they see themselves as less from here on out, and they see it easier to continue in this same pattern, and the devaluing that happens in that way with premarital sex. The fact that now this young lady who saw herself as a prize, or this young man saw themselves as a prize, now for so many of them, they no longer have any of that self-worth because of that. So I think it's even a step further, even the emotional side of the destruction that it causes within a student it's just tragic.
Generally, movies and music and TV does not promote or doesn't address that side of the issue. Is that there are emotional implications, and that it can create that emotional stress and take a toll internally when a child becomes sexually active. So we do from our perspective of character education, we do promote abstinence, and it's the only there's no negative consequences from abstinence. I would say that sometimes people talk about even birth control and different types of ways of preventing pregnancy, but there's a failure rate with every one of them, and there's no failure rate with abstinence. So that is the safest way, and definitely something that as parents we can feel good about promoting to our kids.
Definitely.
I often hear parents say, how can I tell my child not to do this when I did that?
Okay.
And so if you just rely on your regret to prevent you from having these conversations, then you're going to have more regret, worse regret, because it's your child.
Right.
So what if you share that regret with them and be honest with them, depending.
Right.
Just to let them know I wasn't perfect, but I want to let you know, hey, these are some ways to prevent these emotional issues down the road. These are ways to prevent more things from happening that are more negative in your life.
Right.
There again, being authentic as much as you're comfortable with it.
Exactly.
And let them know, look, this can happen if. Instead of, well, I did that, so who am I to say they shouldn't?
You know, another thing is that we have this shift in our mindset when it comes to talking about sex, because if we're honest, we would all say we have lied at some point, but that does not prevent us from telling our kids not to lie. We may even look back at a time, where you stole something, but that would not prevent us from teaching our children not to steal. So again, there's this shift in mindset that if I have messed up in that way, I cannot address it.
Right.
And that's not a helpful mindset, for parenting, is because we can't look and say we've been perfect in every way. So that would be the only way we could address an issue with our child, is if we've been perfect in every way, and none of us have. So, regardless of any kind of failure, that doesn't keep us from giving that caution and warning.
It really should be the opposite.
Yes.
We really, you learn from your mistakes. I mean,
Right.
that really should be how we parent that way. We've made some mistakes, and I've had my shares. Paul said, I'm the chief of sinners. At the same time, I don't let that hinder how I want my daughters to live and the expectations that I believe Christ has for my children. And so I'm not going to sit back and say, okay, look, you do whatever you want to because I did No, I want better for you. I want better for you in school. I struggled in a lot of areas in school, but I want my daughters to have the best. I work hard so that my daughters can have the best. In the same way, when it comes to sexual purity, I want my daughters to have the very best when it comes to the education behind it, when it comes to the expectations behind it. I want them to have the best in the same way that I would want them to have anything else. If they're going to play a sport, what do? We go buy the best bag, the best bat, the best whatever it is. Or if they're wanting to play an instrument, we're going to buy the best instrument. We're going to buy the best teacher in town, or if they want to sing, whatever that looks like. We're going to find the very best for them because we want the best. We know what the best is, and we really should parent that way when it comes to sexual abstinence as well.
Absolutely. For generations, parents have tried to do better by their children.
Right.
They've tried to make a better life for their children. It's no different for us, but we're all human.
Right.
We're all human. We've made mistakes. We've made choices that were intentional, but we've learned from those. And so being authentic, being true, asking questions, listening to your children, being in that moment and having it a continuous process in your world is crucial. When we do that, we're able to more effectively communicate with our kids, whether it be about the report card grades, about sex, about sports. It just makes us better all around, and it helps us teach our kids how to be better as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that this has been beneficial. Our desire was that we would just be able to show you some things that we have encountered with students and be able to pass that information along to you and hopefully help you have some conversations with your kids that would be beneficial to them.